Road journeys, do you remember them? Cool. There's some good films about road journeys. Thelma and Louise. One or two other, Blues Brothers. Oh, yeah, that was dreadful, wasn't it? What was that called? Yeah, I mean, so many of them. But I suggest to you this one that we've just heard about, this road journey from Jerusalem to Damascus, eclipses the lot. There's Saul for a start, and he's got letters of authority to take prisoners and to bring them back to Jerusalem and to kill them. A license to kill, he's holding it, and he's taking it triumphantly to Damascus, and he's riding out in great power and authority with his staff. He wanted to destroy the church. And actually, Luke tells us the word he uses is like what a wild animal would do to you. He wanted to maul ferociously and savage the way, people of the way, and to take back those who'd escaped the persecution in Jerusalem and execute them. And on the way, he's knocked to the ground and blinded, and in great shock, the one who is persecuting him tells him, actually, why are you doing it? That he is God and he is alive. This is a body blow. You have to imagine, the shock that would have been to Paul, a good Jew, a body blow. Now, some of this stuff has come into our language, hasn't it? We have a Damascus Road. Yeah, I heard that being said the other day. Damascus Road means you go along one stretch and then you change your mind completely and turn and go back the other way. We use it for repentance, of course. That's what repentance means. Seen the light. Again, that's common phraseology now, isn't it? I've seen the light. I didn't understand this before. I was completely in the dark. But now I have seen the light. But of course, that originates from Paul's journey from Jerusalem to Damascus. I think there's a parallel here. When you're traveling, and Christians think actually and talk about the faith journey as a journey. Sometimes we think that actually when we become Christians and we've seen the light, we've arrived. But are we nearly there yet? No, we're not. No, Paul's just at the start of his journey, isn't he? When he hits the light in Damascus, or just before Damascus. And he starts off with great confidence, and then he's led blind and speechless and unable to drink anything into Damascus by the hand. That's when his journey started. He wasn't nearly there yet. In fact, from the Bible's accounts, he's got a long way to go. There's 3 years in Arabia, so Galatians tells us. Then on to Damascus, back there again. Then making Christian friends like Barnabas, 14 years later to Jerusalem, after preaching to the Gentiles and founding churches all over the known world. 3 really dangerous journeys in all. He tells us he had great endurance, he endured beatings, he had imprisonment, he was distressed, in hardship, he had sleepless nights, he was hungry, that's 2 Corinthians chapter 6. And then in chapter 11, 5 times he says, I had the 40 lashes minus 1, 3 times I was beaten with rods, I was stoned once, shipwrecked 3 times, constantly on the move. I had danger from bandits and Gentiles and Jews, danger in the city, danger in the country, danger at sea. What a journey. And yet then he writes in Romans, who can separate us from the love of Christ? Will trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger? No, he says. In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. Did you get the in bit? In the middle of all these things, as we go through them, In all these things, we are more than conquerors, because nothing can separate us from the love of God, and it is through him who loved us that we know this. And, you're all on a Christian journey. Some of you maybe just started recently. Others of you been doing it some years, a lifetime perhaps. And in those journeys, you bumped into things that are totally unexpected. Now, how did you approach those? When I prayed that God would help me pass that physics exam, and that if I did, I'd become a vicar, I didn't expect that. Really, really didn't. No, we need to be patient and keep going. We haven't arrived yet. But actually, there are three things at the start of Saul's journey that are the same as the start of our journey. And I just want to encourage you with these things. One, the journey is God's initiative. He started it, so he'll finish it. I've started, so I'll finish. That's what he says to us. Miraculous, God's Son was revealed to Paul. And Paul later wrote, God who said, let light shine out of darkness, he has made his light shine in our hearts so that we can see, I've seen the light. He opens our blind eyes with his creative power, the power that made the world, the power that said, let light shine out of darkness. Same light shone into our hearts. It's God's initiative. Second thing, God calls by name. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? At the start of the journey, it didn't mean that Saul thought to himself, I'm not sure about this persecuting thing is a good idea. He didn't come to some cerebral acceptance of propositions about the way as opposed to the Jewish faith. No, he had a face-to-face meeting with Jesus. Kathy and I were visiting my mum in the JR, and we were just going through the entrance, having parked the car, and I saw somebody I knew I recognized. I knew that one of the person in that big group was one of Kathy's best friends. I said, Janie! And the look of shock on her face, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? I said, Kathy's here. Oh! We've got a photograph, haven't we? Now we call her by name because we have a relationship with her. Some years since we've seen her. And Paul is called by name, and if Paul can become a Christian, anyone can become a Christian. That's God's initiative, and he calls by name. Anyone can. Now, just think of the people you've given up praying for. Just for a minute. I'm thinking of Naj. Naj was the husband of one of our curates, who was nominal Muslim. And we kept praying for him, because without actually, Jenny was going to go into parish life, but Naj really couldn't face it, understandably. And we prayed for him, and then we gave up. And on one day, when they were about to leave, and Jenny was going to become a prison chaplain, Jenny said, Naj came to me and said he'd become a Christian. And I was amazed. And then she told us he'd become a Christian several months ago. But he was keeping it from us because he didn't know whether it was real or not. He'd sat next to somebody on a plane to the States on business, and by the end of the journey, he'd decided to accept Christ. Isn't that amazing? Ooh, yeah. And that encourages me never to give up praying. If Paul can become a Christian, anyone can become a Christian. Moreover, if Paul can be forgiven, anyone can be forgiven. And I'm saying this because there are people here, I'm sure, who struggle with being sure they are forgiven. And I'd like you, please, to write down what you think you're not forgiven for on a bit of paper and show me your list afterwards. And explain to me why you think you are worse than Paul. Or Saul, as he started off. It's what we say, isn't it, at confirmation? God has called you by name and made you his own. And if he could do that on his own initiative, he can forgive through Christ. Hold those things together, because the journey is an unexpected one, and I know that actually for all of us there'll be things that we won't expect, either sooner or later. But in all of them, we ought to have Pat coming up here and telling us about this, but I won't. Pat, don't worry. And there are others here as well. So it's good to talk with each other and how to encourage one another on the road. I'm going to ask Di now, before we have our prayers, to come and read a lovely poem which should probably be familiar to you. Di.
One night, I dreamed a dream. As I was walking along the beach with my Lord, across the dark sky flashed scenes from my life. For each scene, I noticed 2 sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to me and one to my Lord. After the last scene of my life flashed before me, I looked back at the footprints in the sand. I noticed that at many times along the path of my life, especially at the very lowest and saddest times, there was only one set of footprints. This really troubled me, so I asked the Lord about it. Lord, you said once I decided to follow you, you'd walk with me all the way. But I noticed that during the saddest and most troublesome times of my life, there was only one set of footprints. I don't understand why, when I needed you the most, you would leave me. He whispered, "My precious child, I love you and will never leave you, never ever, during your trials and testings. When you saw only one set of footprints, it was then that I carried you."